Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? The hunt never ends. You thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you? The note read. The man had shivered when he had read those ominous words, as perspiration began to drip down from his temple, the salty liquid seeping into his eyes and temporarily blinding him. This is the end, the man had said to himself in an agitated, trembling whisper as he looked down at the sheet of notepaper which had been left on his office desk. He glanced around at the other employees to see if anyone was looking his way, giving him some indication on who had left the message. But all of them were engaged in their own little world of toting up the facts and figures which were constantly coming through on their computer terminals. What had caused this man to turn deathly white and feel so nauseous? How had those 9 little words on the page that had now turned his world completely upside down come to cause him so much anguish and despair? That unhappy event had happened a week before. So let us now find out what had caused this man, Henry Miller, to end up in this now distressing location where he now found himself. At this moment, he was looking between the slats of a Venetian blind, observing the street outside, and trying as best as he could to remain unseen from the road in front of the building, where he now cringed, frightened out of his wits. How had it come to this? He thought. Last week, he didn't have a care in the world. All was going well at work. And then came that note, and he found himself involved in something that had instantly changed his life. And now he was on the run, constantly looking over his shoulder, and at this moment hiding in this abandoned building, a structure that had a large sign outside stating that it was condemned and would shortly be torn down. So, how long could he remain here before he had to find another place of sanctuary? The year is 1948. The war is over. After 6 years of bloodshed and butchery by a psychopath and his evil, willing collaborators, during which an estimated 80 to 100 million people had died or been murdered. The Nuremberg trials had finished, and many, many hundreds of German Nazi war criminals had found justice on the end of a rope for crimes against humanity. Then there were some who had decided that a cyanide pill was a much quicker way to escape the noose of retribution. Others, seeing that the end was near, had made their getaway before the Russians entered Berlin and tortured them, finding their way to South America, where many of them lived for a while, trying to evade the men from the Simon Wiesenthal organization, people dedicated to finding every last Nazi and bringing them to justice, headed by their leader, a man known as the Nazi Hunter, who was a Holocaust survivor. Even though many years have passed, the hunt still goes on, still finding those vile and depraved monsters, a subspecies of the human race. Although some are well into their dotage, justice is still being served. A particular case in point is the case of Adolf Eichmann, who, along with Heinrich Himmler, was the architect of the final solution, where 6 million Jews were sent to the death camps, only to be gassed, their bodies cremated, and the remains crushed. Eichmann was finally located in Argentina in 1961, thinking that after 16 years, he was safe. But justice caught up with him, and he met the Grim Reaper on the end of a rope a year later. But returning to Henry Miller, a man who had changed his name from Henrik Mengele and who had managed to escape from his home in Germany to live in Spain, a neutral country during the war, just after the conflict had begun. The surname he was born with, Mengele, was the same name as the man who was once revered by the Nazi Party for his inhumane and horrific experiments on unwilling participants. The infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele, a man given the name of the Angel of Death, a man, if indeed he could even be called that, who performed appalling and unspeakable experimentation on live inmates of the concentration camp at Auschwitz. Most of those subjects dying a lingering, painful, and agonizing death, all in the cause of making the so-called German master race into a nation of blue-eyed, blonde, Aryan supermen. But what had caused Henry to be reduced to his present situation? It was all due to that one barge letter that he had found on his desk just over a week before, which caused him a great deal of torment. He had read the words, his trembling hands trying to stop the shaking that was coursing through his body. The words that read, "You thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you?" For many years, he had feared that maybe someone, somewhere, at some time, might find out about his namesake and make his life a living hell, maybe even murder him, with the idea that he was in some way engaged in the work carried out by that misguided and psychotic mass murderer, and had, somehow, missed out on receiving the same fate that had befallen the other members of the Nazi death squads. But he had been so careful and had never told anyone of his former name or his possible relationship to the Angel of Death at Auschwitz. So, how could someone have found out where he lived or worked. The only way out that he could think of was to go on the run, getting well away from anyone he had worked with and from where he had lived. He had no plan, just a crazed idea that he must stay out of sight in this empty building before he made his next move. All sorts of wild ideas coursing through his brain. Thoughts that he had never even dreamt about, up until now, came into his mind. It was a few weeks later in the office where Henry had formerly been employed, a place from which he had mysteriously disappeared sometime previously, without explanation. One of the other employees who had worked with him had just read an article in the newspaper that had shocked him. It mentioned that his former workmate had been found dead in an abandoned building, having seemingly committed suicide by ingesting a cyanide pill. As tears welled up in his eyes, he murmured words that he found extremely difficult to say. "Henry, what happened? Why did you do it? Just as your friends here were organizing a surprise party for your birthday. You tried so hard to keep it a secret, and you thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you?" Foreboding. It was all too much, really. The woman and the boy dragged their tired legs through the deep snow. Ahead of them, far off in the distance, lay the undulating, snow-covered hills where the log cabin they were heading for had been built many years previously. The two could picture in their minds a blazing fire and hot chocolate with little marshmallows floating on the surface, and it was this that kept them going. The boy, a young teenager, often had to support the woman and help her across fallen trees that hampered their progress. The woman was exhausted, and every few minutes she stopped, leaning heavily over her knees, trying desperately to catch her breath. The boy stopped with her every time, but his eyes kept traveling anxiously across the vast expanse of land they had to cross to reach their goal. Being younger and fitter, he didn't need as many breaks as the woman did, but he never complained. It was more important for him to bring the woman back alive than to force her to walk faster. They set off again, the woman hanging on to the boy's arm. The surface underneath them suddenly turned slippery. They had reached the frozen lake finally. There was still a long way to go, but at least there were no hills or fallen trees to navigate. The woman stopped again. Her breathing was labored, and she had trouble drawing a deep enough breath to regain some strength. She was crying from the exhaustion. The boy knelt down and held her. His face was worried and concerned. His hands shook somewhat as he gently patted the woman's back. A man walked past in a sideways manner, like a crab. He waved at the pair and smiled. The woman stretched out a hand towards the man, imploringly, and the boy gave him a surly look. But the man just smiled again and continued through the deep snow. He wore only one snowshoe, which explained his strange gait. but it didn't seem to hamper his progress. He flattened the snow with his snowshoe-clad foot and hardly sunk through the snow at all. With the other foot, the woman looked at the flattened snow and then looked up at the boy. He smiled at her. At least there would now be an easier path for them to use. The woman straightened up and, sensing renewed vigor, pulled the boy to his feet. They hugged, took each other's hand, and started walking again. Ahead of them, the man continued his crab walk, humming a monotonous tune that sounded more like a low rumble than anything else. He turned his head, saw them walking behind him, and motioned for them to follow, nodding his head encouragingly. As the man forged ahead in front of them, the distance between them and him grew. The man was walking unnaturally fast, considering the conditions and his unconventional gait, and the boy grew anxious. He tried to walk faster to keep up, and the distance between him and the woman increased unrelentingly. She called his name, but he seemed oblivious. He had his eyes firmly on the man, who was now barely visible far ahead of them, and did not stop when the woman needed a break again. She called him feebly, but she had no strength to raise her voice. She cried again, cursing her tired legs and laboring lungs. Once more, she bent over her knees, trying to catch her breath. She wanted to scream. She wanted to beg the boy to wait, but no words could be heard. A flutter on the wind, a change in the vibrations another human being causes when they disturb the airflow, caused her to look up. The boy was no longer visible from her vantage point, bent double over her knees. She straightened up quickly, her heart beating faster. Where was the boy? Squinting to look in front of her, she suddenly saw his head pop up, arms flailing, and then disappear again. Her heart fell into her stomach. He had gone through the ice. Finding a strength she didn't know she had, the woman ran. The snow was deep and felt like syrup. She screamed in frustration and then called the boy's name. As she got closer, she slowed down, walking fast but carefully towards the boy. He was bobbing up and down again, waving his arms, but he made no sound. The cold water had robbed him of his voice, and his open mouth, so poignant in his horrified face, only mimicked the sound he was trying to make. Suddenly, he disappeared again, and only his hand was sticking up over the snow. The woman, no longer trying to be cautious, threw herself down on the ice and found his hand. Seconds before, it would have disappeared under the water. She felt the boy grabbing the hand, and she pulled, the adrenaline and fear giving her more strength than she had ever had before. The boy's head appeared again. He looked straight at the woman, and there was a panic in his eyes that scared her more than anything else. She noticed that there wasn't much room for his head, and with a jolt of fear, she realized the fissure in the ice was closing up, and fast. The boy's head disappeared under the water again, despite her holding on to his hand, and the hole kept closing. Now, there was no way the boy could get his head through the hole to draw breath again, and she screamed in fear and panic. With her free hand, she started pounding on the ice around the hole. The ice was too hard, and her frail beating could not even chip away at the surface. Keeping a firm hold on the hand that still gripped hers convulsively, she tried bashing a hole in the ice with the heel of one boot, but the ice would not even crack. The boy's hand started losing its grip on her hand, and she wailed in desperation, stomping harder on the ice, standing up to add weight to the pounding on the ice. She lost her grip on the boy's hand, and it slipped below the water, the hole finally closing inexorably around it with a sucking sound, far away from the location in her dream. The woman woke up sobbing, sweat moistening her forehead, and shaking from head to toe. A pain in her chest so intense it brought tears to her eyes. The woman tried taking a deep breath. She was moaning, and her heart was beating so rapidly it hurt. Next to her, her husband was snoring loudly, completely oblivious to her plight. This was nothing new. It would more than likely take an earthquake to wake him up at this hour, and she didn't need him anyway. She gently pushed the blankets aside and slipped out of bed. She had to make sure he was safe. The dream had been so vivid, so real. Tiptoeing across the hall, shivering slightly in the cold night air that permeated the house, she arrived in her older son's bedroom. A soft snoring could be heard from the room. As she neared, a quiet meow greeted her. Looking into the room, the lamp-like eyes of their cat Brandy were staring back at her, and the animal meowed quietly again. Letting her breath out, she hadn't even been aware of holding it. She tiptoed over to stroke the cat gently. "Good girl, you stay with him. Keep him safe for me." Looking down upon her teenage son, his mouth open and his wavy hair in disarray around his peaceful face, she felt her throat constrict slightly, and she had to swallow hard to stifle the moan that had almost escaped her mouth again. The dream was still so alive in her mind, and the sense of foreboding was making her eyes water, her chest aching so much she was afraid it would burst open. Wanting desperately to wake him up just to hold him, she instead stretched her hand out, stroking her son's forehead gently before retreating out into the hall again. Feeling compelled to check on her younger son as well, she continued down the hall to the third bedroom. He was sleeping on top of his covers, his little thumb securely lodged in his mouth. She could tell he was cold as he was curled up in a fetal position, and she carefully tugged the blanket out from under him, covering his little body and tucking it in around the sides of the bed. There was no point in going back to bed now. She was wide awake, and in less than an hour and a half, she would have to be up to help the kids get ready for school. She tiptoed past her husband, still in his bed, snoring loudly, to grab her bathrobe, and then snuck downstairs to make a cup of tea. Sunlight was forcing its way into her kitchen when she arrived back downstairs, penetrating dusty corners and pushing through a curtain of tiny dust particles that had been stirred up as she grabbed a tea towel to wipe the cup. And she sat down at the kitchen table, carefully sipping a steaming cup of Earl Grey. She still felt cold inside, shivering slightly, even as the warm liquid made its way to her empty stomach. The image of her son's head disappearing under the ice in her dream, still so clear in her mind, it was making her shake her head repeatedly, as if to rid herself of an annoying fly. She was wringing her hands, moaning quietly every time she saw the hand disappearing under the ice in her mind's eye. Would she ever be able to forget this dream? Little tiny clicks on the kitchen floor told her that Brandy had decided to join her in the kitchen. The cat looked up at the woman as she rounded the kitchen island on her way to her food bowl, but seemed entirely intent on wanting to satisfy her hunger for food before satisfying other needs, such as attention from her human owner. And she beat her regular path right over to her food bowl without stopping. The bowl was empty, accusing feline eyes locked into hers. Brandy sat down, looked back at her bowl, and then up again at the woman. It was obvious that the cat was asking for food, but the woman, who was still feeling faint from her nightmare, seemed oblivious. A soft meow mingled with a purr escaped the tiny mouth as the cat stood back up again and sauntered over. Wrapping herself around the human legs, she began a relentless meowing until the woman finally surrendered and got up off her chair to feed the cat. That's when she saw it. Next to the canister where they kept the cat's food, there was a pile of unopened and unchecked mail from the day before. On the top, underneath a blue envelope, apparently sent out by Publishers Clearinghouse, she was probably about to win $5,000 a week for life, was something white. She realized that she was looking at a picture of snow, and with trepidation and horrific foreboding, she pulled the catalog out from under the envelope. It was a magazine on vacation cottages in northern Maine. Her husband had been canvassing for this vacation for months and had obviously ordered the catalog. And on the front was a picture of a rustic-looking cabin with snow drifts lapping the windows. In the background, a frozen lake could be seen. The woman caught her breath and felt her knees buckle. Next to the cabin Locking eyes with her from the picture stood the man from her dream, smiling benignly, holding his hand out towards the cottage. In his other hand, he was holding one snowshoe. Mercifully, darkness enveloped her, and she escaped. For a while. It was all too much, really. The day Los Angeles. Changed Sophia's spoon clinked against porcelain as she stirred her tea, the sound barely audible beneath the morning bustle of the morning brew. Outside the window, autumn painted the small town of San Bernardino in shades of amber and gold. So different from Los Angeles, where even fall seemed reluctant to interrupt the city's relentless energy. "You're stirring that tea to death," her mother observed, eyes crinkling with gentle humor. "Still not sleeping well?" Sophia looked up, caught in the act. Serenity Williams had always possessed an uncanny ability to read her daughter, even as cancer steadily claimed her strength. Today was a good day. Her mother sat upright without assistance, her silver-streaked hair neatly combed, her smile warm despite the hollowness in her cheeks. "Claire's having nightmares again," Sophia admitted. "And Mark's firm is restructuring, which means longer hours. I'm not sure this was the right time to visit, even for a weekend." Serenity reached across the table, her hand light but steady as it covered Sophia's. "There's never a perfect time for anything important. You're here now. That's what matters." The cafe hummed around them, baristas calling out orders, the espresso machine hissing, customers tapping away at their laptops or scrolling through their phones. On a wall-mounted television, the morning news rolled through its predictable cycle. Political tensions, economic forecasts, celebrity gossip. The scent of fresh coffee and baked goods wrapped around them like a familiar blanket. "Tell me more about Claire's school play," Serenity prompted, taking a careful sip from her cup. "You said she landed the lead role?" Sophia's face brightened. "She's playing Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. You should see her practicing Somewhere Over the Rainbow around the house. Mark recorded her last rehearsal. I can show you." Her words trailed off as the cafe's television caught her attention. The news had switched to a traffic helicopter shot over Los Angeles. A routine segment showing the morning gridlock. The reporter's voice carried over footage of the 405 freeway, mentioning construction delays near Westwood, where Mark worked. Expect those delays to continue through the afternoon rush hour. Alternative routes are advised for. The screen flashed white. For a fraction of a second, Sophia thought it was a technical glitch. Then the blinding light resolved into something else, as two massive fireballs erupted over the Los Angeles skyline, twin terrifying mushroom clouds climbing into the atmosphere. The helicopter camera jolted violently, the image spinning as the reporter's voice cut off mid-sentence, static. Then, blackness. The morning brew fell silent. Every conversation halted mid-word. every movement suspended. For 3 long seconds, no one breathed. Sophia felt the world contract to a pinpoint. Sophia let slip a tiny gasp. Her coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering against the floor. But she couldn't hear it. All she could see was that burning flower blossoming over her home, over Mark, over Claire. Sophia, her mother's voice seemed to come from miles away. Sophia, look at me. Sophia couldn't move, couldn't blink. At a loss for words, her body had turned to stone while her mind screamed. Around them, the stunned silence fractured. Someone gasped. A man at the counter swore loudly. A barista fumbled for the remote control, frantically changing channels. Each station showed variations of the same nightmare: emergency broadcasts, confused anchors, footage of the explosion from different angles. What appears to be at least 2 nuclear detonations over Los Angeles. No official statement yet from authorities, advising all residents to shelter in place. Sophia's phone vibrated in her pocket. Her heart leapt. Mark? Claire? But when she pulled it out with trembling fingers, the screen displayed only an emergency alert. National emergency declared. Shelter in place. Await further instructions. She stared at the message, its cold, bureaucratic tone at odds with the catastrophe unfolding. Desperately, she tried calling Mark's number. Nothing. She tried Claire's phone. Nothing again. Each attempt met with the same automated message. All circuits are currently busy. Please try your call again later. That sterile, mechanical voice seemed to mock her panic. All circuits busy. As if this were just another holiday, with too many calls being placed at once. As if her world hadn't just collapsed into ash. Around them, the cafe erupted into chaos. People scrambled for phones, for exits, for any semblance of control. A businessman shouted into his dead cell about evacuations. A college student sobbed openly into her hands. The barista continued flipping channels frantically, as if one might suddenly offer reassurance. Is it just LA? Someone demanded. Are there other cities? My sister's in San Diego, a woman cried. She's not answering. The terrorists might have finally developed a nuke. No, it's gotta be an accident. Nuclear war, man. The Chinese, the Russians. Outside, ancient, long disused air raid sirens began to wail. Through the window, Sophia could see people rushing down the sidewalks, some toward their cars, others seemingly without direction. A police cruiser sped past, lights flashing. Sophia's thoughts whirled like debris in a tornado. Mark and Claire. 12 miles from downtown Los Angeles. Was that close enough to the blasts? Had Mark gotten to Claire's school in time? Were they trying to leave the city or shelter in place? The questions multiplied, each more terrifying than the last. The spell binding Sophia's tongue broke, and she could finally speak. "I have to go back," she whispered, then louder. "I have to go back to LA." Her mother's grip tightened around her wrist. "Sophia, breathe. Think. They need me." Panic clawed at Sophia's throat. "I need to find them. Look at the TV," Serenity said firmly. Look, the television now showed aerial footage of highways leading out of Los Angeles. Gridlock unlike anything Sophia had ever seen. Thousands of vehicles at a standstill, some abandoned as people continued on foot. The military conspicuously absent from every possible scene, advising against attempting to enter the Los Angeles metro area. Radiation concerns as far as 40 miles from the blast sites. National Guard has been activated. Sophia's phone buzzed again with the same emergency alert. National emergency declared. Shelter in place. Await further instructions. "I can't just sit here," Sophia hissed, tears finally breaking through her shock. "Mom, I can't." Serenity pulled herself up straighter, summoning strength that shouldn't have been possible in her frail body. When she spoke, her voice cut through the cafe's panic with surprising authority. "Listen to me, Sophia Ayala Williams. Your fear wants you to run, but running blind is how people get killed in disasters." She took Sophia's trembling hands in hers. "Breathe first, think second, act third. You taught Claire that, remember? When she gets overwhelmed, the mention of her daughter's name sent fresh pain through Sophia's chest. But she forced herself to inhale deeply. Once, twice. Her mother's eyes held hers, anchoring her to the moment. "Mark is smart," Serenity continued. "He knows to get Claire somewhere safe. He knows you're here with me. You charging into a nuclear disaster zone helps no one. But what if? No what ifs yet. Facts first. What do we know? Despite herself, Sophia felt her analytical mind begin to engage. There were 2 explosions over Los Angeles. People were leaving the city, but the military does not seem to be reacting yet. There looked like a massive area of LA leveled by the explosion. Good. What else? Roads are jammed. The military will soon be blocking entry. There might be radiation. The reality of that word hit her anew, and she swallowed hard. Communications are overloaded, with everyone trying to check on their loved ones. The news cut to a press briefing where the perky smile of the blonde, blue-eyed, and comely presidential press secretary, incongruent to the chaos erupting, confirmed what everyone already knew. 2 nuclear devices had detonated over Los Angeles. Origin unknown. Casualty estimates pending. Military response underway. The potential for additional attacks could not be ruled out. "And does everyone like my new lip gloss?" the press secretary asked. "I can't just wait here," Sophia whispered. "I can't." Serenity studied her daughter's face. "No, you can't. But you need a plan, not panic." For the next hour, as the world unraveled around them, Sophia and her mother remained at their table. The cafe transformed into an impromptu crisis center for the customers. The owner turned up the television volume, distributed free coffee, and allowed people to charge phones on every available outlet. Information trickled in. The blasts had occurred over downtown Los Angeles. Early estimates suggested the devices were relatively small by nuclear standards. Tactical nukes, like the RSM-56 Bulava, rather than strategic nuclear weapons. But devastating nonetheless. Sophia tried every communication method she could think of. Calls, texts, emails, and social media messages. Most failed, but occasionally a text would go through, only to receive no response. She left voice messages that grew increasingly desperate. "I'm coming to find you. Wait for me. I love you both." Outside, the town of San Bernardino transformed. Police directed traffic at intersections. Lines formed at gas stations. The grocery store across the street was mobbed. People hugged strangers or argued violently about what to do next. And through it all, Serenity remained calm, her presence a counterweight to the mounting hysteria. She helped Sophia gather information, separating facts from rumors, while conserving her limited energy. "The radiation reports are mixed," Sophia noted, scanning emergency updates on her tablet. "Some areas might be relatively safe, especially with proper precautions. And Mark knows this," Serenity reminded her. "He'll get Claire to safety if he can." If he can. The words hung between them, unaddressed. By mid-afternoon, Sophia had made her decision. She would return to Los Angeles, not in blind panic, but with purpose and preparation. Her mother didn't try to dissuade her. She recognized the determination in her daughter's eyes. "I'll be back for you," Sophia promised as she prepared to leave. "Once I find them, we'll all come back here." Serenity smiled sadly. "I know you will." She pressed something into Sophia's hand, a small silver locket containing a family photo. For luck, the drive that should have taken over an hour stretched before Sophia like an impossible gauntlet. Roads would be clogged. Gas might be scarce. And at the end waited either reunion or devastation. "I love you, Mom," she whispered, embracing Serenity carefully, conscious of her fragility. "Find them," Serenity replied simply. "Be smart. Be safe." As Sophia's car pulled away from the morning brew, Serenity Williams watched from the window. Sophia touched her fingers to the glass in silent farewell, praying that her mother, Serenity, and her daughter, Claire, would forgive her for the choice she'd been forced to make today. Between the mother who was dying and the family who might already be gone. The afternoon shadows grew long as Sophia's car raced along the westbound interstate back to Los Angeles. The main highways heading east had quickly become impassable, choked with the vehicles of fleeing civilians. Radio reports described mass evacuations from areas surrounding Los Angeles, the declaration of martial law, and conflicting radiation warnings. Sophia had expected gridlock all the way, but the lack of any vehicle but hers heading west made the drive that more unsettling. The traffic thinned as she approached LA. The further she drove, the emptier the roads became. She was alone on the freeway. A surreal experience on roadways normally congested at all hours. The emptiness carried its own warning. She was driving toward something everyone else was fleeing. Sophia's GPS had stopped working hours ago, but she didn't need it. 15 years in Los Angeles had etched these routes into her memory. Exit here, turn there, the familiar path home. As she crested the final hill that should have revealed their neighborhood, her headlights illuminated a transformed landscape. Where apartment buildings and shopping centers should have stood, there was absence, rubble, small fires, and just nothing. A perfect circle of annihilation. She pulled to the side of the road, stepping out into air that smelled wrong, like sulfur and ash and things that had no name. The evening was eerily quiet. No sirens, no voices, no wildlife, just the soft tick of her cooling engine and the blood rushing in her ears. Beyond the destruction's edge, buildings remained mostly intact, untouched save for their destroyed windows, as if a giant cookie cutter had stamped down from above, removing only what lay within its circumference. Their apartment had been 3 blocks inside what was now emptiness. Sophia walked forward in a daze, approaching the edge of obliteration. Something crunched beneath her shoes, glass fused with asphalt, transformed by unimaginable heat. The boundary between existence and nothingness was shockingly abrupt. Mark wouldn't have had time to leave home and then driven to Claire's school, she reasoned desperately. He could have left early for his regular gym workout and could have driven straight to her. Her school must be outside this circle. They could still be alive. They must be. The distant growl of engines broke the silence. Headlights swept the devastation as a convoy of military vehicles rumbled into view. Camp Pendleton Marines, in full hazmat gear, disembarked, moving with half-practiced efficiency. One spotted her and approached, face obscured behind a protective mask. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area. You need to evacuate immediately." The faceless Marine barked. "My family," Sophia's voice cracked. "My husband and daughter. They lived here." The soldier's posture remained tense and rigid, clearly on edge. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There were no survivors within the blast radius. Radiation levels here are dangerous. We need to leave now." "But they might not have been home," she insisted. "My daughter's school. It must be outside the blast radius. My husband might have—" "Ma'am?" The soldier cut her off, not unkindly. "Secondary evacuation sites have been established for survivors. Check there. But you can't stay here. It isn't safe." As if to emphasize his point, a radiation detector at his belt emitted a persistent clicking that grew faster as they stood talking. "Where?" she demanded. "Where are these evacuation sites?" Before he could answer, another Marine approached rapidly. "Sir, we've got missile incoming." "What?" said the first Marine. "Bogey confirmed. ETA 2 minutes." The first Marine's demeanor changed instantly. "Everyone back to your vehicles. Move, move, move." Around them, the unit scrambled into motion, abandoning whatever task had brought them to ground zero. "What's happening?" Sophia asked, fear rising anew in her chest. The Marine gripped her arm. "Another missile, headed right for us. We need to go, now." "Another?" The words died in her throat as understanding dawned. This wasn't over. "Now," the soldier urged. "Get in your car and drive east as fast as you can. Don't stop until you're at least 50 miles out." Sophia stumbled back toward her vehicle, moving on autopilot. As she reached for the door handle, some instinct made her look up. There, cutting across the darkening evening sky, was a thin, white line, like a shooting star, moving in slow motion. But unlike a shooting star, it wasn't arcing away. It was descending, the third, markedly larger missile coming to finish what the first two had started. Sophia stood frozen, again at a loss for words, with her hand still extended toward her car door. The Marine shouted something at her, but his words were lost in the strange silence that had enveloped her consciousness. She watched the white line grow brighter and tracked its inevitable path toward the ruined city, toward her. In that moment, Sophia understood with perfect clarity what her mother had tried to teach her that morning. Some forces were beyond human control. Some decisions led only to different versions of the same ending. She thought of Mark and Claire. Whether they had perished already, or had they survived only to face this missile. She thought of her mother, alone in San Bernardino, watching the news and knowing her daughter would never return. Sophia's hand dropped from the car door. The approaching missile reflected in her eyes as she tilted her face skyward. There would be no scream, no lamentation, no running from what had already been decided. There was only the overwhelming weight of understanding. The nightmare wasn't over. It was only beginning. Car radio. The silence is deafening. Finley stares at the empty slot where the radio should be. The hole in the center console mocks him. The engine roars and jumps to life. Finley laughs at the power and presses the gas pedal. The engine responds and races down the street. He sighs and shrugs off the silence. At least it's a nice car, he thinks to himself. Finley grips the steering wheel tighter and continues to drive. He's never driven a convertible before. The large amount of snacks sits in the passenger seat. 3 bags of chips, several candy bars, a meat stick, a couple of grape sodas, Red Bull, and an orange Gatorade are piled into a small mountain next to Finley. There is also $437 in his pocket. Finley glances at the convenience store in the rear view mirror as he drives away. The gun wasn't loaded, but the clerk behind the desk didn't need to know that. She graciously gives up her drawer in exchange for her life. Finley smiles as the memory of the robbery passes through his head again. "Everything in the drawer, now," he shouts. The clerk cries, but nods in understanding and opens the register. Ding. This is much easier with a gun, thinks Finley. He grins under his mask. He holds the basket of snacks in his free hand and points the gun at the clerk. Ida is the name on her shirt. She's short with straight black hair and small eyes. Tears run down her cheeks as she collects the bills. With a shaky hand, she gives the money to Finley. "Thank you," Finley decides to say. He runs out the store and watches as a Chevrolet Corvette pulls up to the store. An older gentleman shuts off the engine and opens the door to get out. He sees the gun before he sees Finley. "Give me the keys," Finley says loudly to the man. The elderly man jumps in surprise and quickly hands the keys to Finley. Finley dumps the basket of snacks into the passenger seat, puts the car in reverse, and drives down the road. When he is clear of the scene, he pulls off his mask and tosses it on the floor. He goes to adjust the radio, but the dial isn't there. The whole compartment is empty. Finley is an average man with an average build. His curly locks meet his eyebrows and licks his earlobes. His eyes are wide and too big for his narrow face, close together with long lashes. Stubble on his chin creeps its way up to his sideburns. The long bridge of his nose flares into broad nostrils, and his big pink lips pushes out from his face. He has a birthmark in the shape of a small diamond under his left eye. His cheeks are freckled and covered with a thin layer of dirt. Finley prefers Xbox over PlayStation and drinks apple juice more than a grown man should. He hates roller coasters because he has to sit next to strangers. He loves school, but dropped out his senior year. Finley is passionate, creative, and extremely intelligent. Finley wasn't always a thief, but the worst in his life brings out the best in him. Did I forget to feed Edison? Finley thinks to himself. Edison is his pet goldfish, who spends his days in a sphere on Finley's nightstand. Finley's hamster died in a freak vacuum accident when he was in kindergarten, and since then, he was against pets. Edison was a prize Finley had reluctantly won at a carnival. So far, he's lasted over a year and tripled in size. Finley tugs nervously at his Iron Maiden shirt as he passes a cop. He checks his speed and cautiously pulls the seatbelt over his chest and clicks it into place. He thinks, "Don't pull me over, please." He isn't ready to deal with the police. He hasn't thought this far ahead. The officer turns left and into a gas station. Finley sighs, relief, and looks back at where the radio should be. It's too quiet for him. His thoughts float carelessly through his head. He pictures himself as a police officer for a moment and laughs at the thought. If his dad was around, or if his mother stopped drinking, if his brother never beat him, and if he stayed in school. He wondered where his life would have been then. What kind of person he would be now. An outstanding citizen, he imagines, with a wife and kids. He creates the vision of his family in his head. A woman with large breasts and red hair. 2 kids, 1 boy and 1 girl, with toothless smiles on their dirty faces. They would be soccer players, like Finley was, and always outside. He shakes off the thought. Sucks not having a radio, he thinks. He sits up taller in the driver's seat and lets out a little scream. Ah! He relaxes and slumps back into his seat. He tries to whistle and fails, only allowing air to escape his pursed lips. He blows a tune through his teeth and grunts in frustration. I wish I knew how to whistle. Both my parents could. Even Franklin can, he says in his head. He tries again, and a small tweet of a sound flies from in between his lips. He grins at his small accomplishment. I hate tuna fish, he thinks. Finley starts to space out behind the wheel. The lack of sound tricks his brain. He visualizes a concert he went to last year. He remembers all the pockets he picked and wallets he stole. He made 5 times the amount of the cost of the tickets he paid for, but wasn't able to enjoy the concert properly. The songs of the band echoes throughout his mind. He taps the steering wheel to the beat of the song stuck in his head. He hums the melody. He looked back at the center console and sighed loudly. There wasn't even a clock. What time is it? He wondered. I should have stolen a watch. Or a car with a radio. The car was quiet. Even the purr of the engine was hushed. Everything is still, except the thoughts in Finley's head. He thinks about the graduation he never attended, the smell of his last girlfriend right before she walked out the door, the taste of sea salt ice cream and how it was superior to any other flavor. He pictures the last family photo they had together when times were good. How Franklin had his arm around him in a rare, loving embrace. It is loud in Finley's head, and there is no sound to hide behind. He groans and tries to shake off all his thoughts, clear his head. It's no use. The thoughts always come back, stronger and louder than before. He is going mad from the silence. I can pull the steering wheel. It would be easy to wreck such a nice car. The guardrail teases Finley. He envisions the crash in his head and plays out the scene slowly. The metal twisted around the body of the convertible, the popped wheel and broken windshield. He shakes off the thought and continues driving, now upset by the concept he created in his mind. He can't distract himself from himself. There was nothing to drown out his perception of his own ideations. He can't clear his head. He's trapped within himself. Finley screams and pulls the car over. The wheels spin angrily against the dirt on the shoulder. He bangs the steering wheel with a fist and groans. He hears the sound of sirens and looks in the mirror. He didn't notice the police officer that pulled a U-turn at the last intersection. He didn't see the car behind him getting closer and closer. He watches as a police officer steps out of his squad car and aims a gun at his Corvette. Now what? This isn't part of his plan. He licks his lips and glares at his new challenge. He throws the car into drive and slams on the gas pedal. The car lurches forward and spins wildly back on the road. The cop calls it in and drives after Finley. The two-lane road was barren. The twists and turns makes Finley feel he was back on a roller coaster without the strangers. The contents of his stomach sloshes around. Well, this is great. He wanders ahead, trying to come up with a plan. He didn't know these streets that well, and another police car pulls up alongside Finley. He kicks up the speed and lets out a yelp as the car responds. They race down the street. The sirens blare loudly. Finley watches as the police cars serve and drive around each other like synchronized swimmers after him. These guys are good, but not as good as me. I need to lose them. He thinks about car chase videos he's watched online and in movies. The bad guy always gets caught somehow, with some small mistake he plans to avoid. He turns down a dirt road quickly, but the cars behind don't falter and follow him. The dirt is slick on the wheels, and with the sharp turn, he flips the car. He curses himself as the car rolls into the ditch upside down. The sound of scrapping metal pierces his ears. It's quiet for a moment as the dust settles. He wasn't going to get caught. Especially now, they will find out exactly how many people he's robbed. He isn't planning on going to jail. Edison would miss him. "Step out of the vehicle with your hands in the air," the officer shouts, spit flying out of his mouth. They were behind open car doors, ready for Finley to react. Finley's heart races as his hands went for the unloaded gun. "You'll never take me alive, coppers," he shouts in his mind. He smiles. He was on the track and field team in high school. Surely he could outrun the police. He's done it before, with success. He pushes the car door open, and without thinking, Finley hops out the car and runs, pointing the gun behind him. His feet slip on the loose gravel, but he collects himself and moves his feet fast underneath him. He takes 3 more steps away from the police, gun heavy in his hands. Bang! The silence is deafening. The whisper in the city. The dark skeletons of skyscrapers stretched into the twilight sky. I trudged along an empty street, my feet dragging through the damp sand, leaving deep grooves behind me. How long had I been here? I couldn't tell. The overcast horizon was slowly growing lighter, the mist thinning with each passing moment. The street seemed familiar to me, but any landmarks that might have been here before were completely effaced now. Everything around me was falling apart, disintegrating into sand that covered every inch of the ground. Suddenly, a soft, faint whisper came from somewhere in the distance. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen anyone else in this desolate place, so I shuffled toward the sound. The voice came again, this time a little closer and more insistent, but I still couldn't make out the words or pinpoint where it was coming from. I tried to pick up my pace, but the sand was dense and viscous between my toes. The whisper kept calling, getting clearer, as though someone was tuning a radio. It was soothing, but firm. I sensed it wished me no harm, at least as long as I did what it told me to. Finally, I understood what it was saying. "Come on, just a little bit further," the voice urged. It seemed like it was coming from a building to my right. I stared into the shadows in the gaping doorway that led into a dark hall. Nobody was there. I caught a reflection in one of the grimy shards of glass jutting from a window frame. Was it me? It couldn't be. How could I be this old and shriveled? I turned away and wandered toward the low horizon. "We need to get ready. Somebody is coming," the voice called from up ahead. A warm rain suddenly began to fall. It frothed in my hair and trickled down my cheeks. The air filled with a strange scent, something fresh and sweet. It didn't seem right. Rain shouldn't smell like that. The voice kept coaxing me forward, and I kept on wading through fragrant sheets of rain, my feet squelching in the soggy sand. After a while, the rain stopped, and the sky cleared a little, though the sun was still hidden behind the thick veil of clouds. The lukewarm mist curled around every turn, filling the streets that branched out from the crossroads I passed. If only it were clear enough to see what lay in the distance. Maybe then I could remember. Just as I reached the next junction, the whisper gave me a new command. All right, let's get something to eat. Come on now, turn here. I looked from side to side. Across the road to my left stood the remains of a diner. I plodded toward the building through the endless sand. I thought there couldn't possibly be anything to eat here. But as I stumbled over the threshold, I caught a whiff of toast and coffee. The diner was as decayed as everything else in this city. There was less sand inside than on the street, but it still covered the floor with an even layer. The display counter stood empty, the glass shattered. Here and there, overturned furniture lay scattered across the ground. The upholstery on the chairs and benches had rotted away a long time ago. The cup-shaped clock on the wall was missing its hands. Decay, dust, and sand. There was no one inside. Still, I heard muted whispers coming from every corner, buzzing like cicadas on a summer night. I moved through the room, trying to make out what the voices were saying, but there were just too many of them now. I shuffled through the jumbled chairs and tables to the center of the room. Here, on one of the tables, sat a plate of food and a cup of coffee. My stomach rumbled. There were no utensils, so I grabbed the food with my hands, stuffing it into my mouth. The toast was crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside. The omelet was fluffy and creamy. The coffee was strong and sweet. How long had it been since I had last eaten anything? I wasn't sure. It felt like ages. Suddenly, the air around me shimmered as though in a heat haze. The dilapidated diner faded away, and I found myself in a warm, sunlit kitchen. Light wood furniture, a crisp tablecloth, plates with delicate flower patterns on the rim. A woman stood in front of the stove. Her hair fell in neat waves, and she wore a light blue fit and flare dress. She turned to me and smiled. "Georgie, would you like another piece of toast?" she asked. Was she talking to me? Was that my name? I wanted to ask her what was going on, but before I could find the words, the mirage disappeared. I was back in the decaying diner, an empty plate before me. "Okay, George, you're done? Let's go now," the whisper cooed. I followed the voice back into the street. It kept urging me forward with its bright, incessant tone. Well, at least now I knew my name. But all the other questions still whirled in my head. What did the voice want from me? Where was I going? How long had I been here? Who was I? Really, it felt like this mess in my head would boil over, washing away all this dirty sand and all the debris of this dead city. I gritted my teeth, clenched my fists, and plowed forward. At last, the road led me to a park. Patches of grass poked through the sand. The trees, covered in yellow and red leaves, peeked through the fog, taunting me. A path lined with benches led into the mist. All right, let's sit down here. I settled onto the nearest bench. Quiet fragments of music fluttered to me from somewhere far away. The sound was comforting, familiar. The voice hummed around me for a moment before fading into the background. The music grew louder and steadier. I thought I recognized the melody, but couldn't quite put my finger on it. It reminded me of someone I used to miss. I sat alone, enveloped by the soothing blanket of music, staring at the colorful trees before me. Bit by bit, my angst and frustration melted away. After a while, I heard the whispers again. The voice that had been guiding me was talking to somebody else now. The new voice seemed familiar, like I'd heard it sometime long ago, in another life. I felt a movement in the air beside me. Someone touched my hand. Dad? Dad, it's me. Child. The small room was tidy and clean. As nice as a room in such a facility could be. The curtains were open, and you could see a small park, colored in gold and red by the approaching cold. An old jazz standard was flowing from the player in the corner. A woman sat on a stool beside an armchair where an old, frail man rested. She held his hand. "I'm sorry, Miss Ross. He's not having a good day today," a nurse said gently from behind the armchair. To be honest, they're few and far between now, and it's hard to say how many more he'll have. I know, but it's still so hard. It's like he's wandering further and further away, the woman said, wiping the corner of her eye. Dad, it's Katie. I'm here." His dry, thin fingers tightened around hers. "I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to do it." The words echoed in my mind as I stood there in the dark, my hands shaking, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the sound of the storm outside. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain hammered against the windows. It was a night that felt like it was made for horrors. But the real terror, my terror, was already inside. I stared down at his body, lying in a pool of crimson that seemed to stretch out, devouring everything it touched. His once bright eyes, filled with laughter and warmth, were now dull and empty. His chest was still, the rhythmic rise and fall I had come to know so well, now forever silenced. It wasn't supposed to end like this. We weren't supposed to be here. I never meant for any of it to happen. The night had started out differently. We were celebrating. Well, I thought we were. It had been a long week for both of us. John had been working late at the office, and I'd been buried in a dozen little tasks at home. We barely saw each other, only passing like two ships in the night. So, when he suggested dinner out, I'd jumped at the chance to spend some quality time together. We went to that little Italian restaurant we loved, the one tucked away in the corner of the city, with the flickering candles and soft music. Everything felt just right. The kind of evening that reminded me of why we had fallen in love in the first place. However, as the night wore on, something changed. Something was off. Something I couldn't explain. It started when John leaned in and rested his hand on mine across the table. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't figure out. Was it uncertainty? Maybe it was just me. I hadn't been sleeping well at all. We had building tension between us for months. First, it was little things that were simple to overlook, but now they were impossible to ignore. "What's on your mind?" I asked, trying to smile back. John sighed and leaned back in his chair, looking down at his plate for a moment before meeting my gaze again. "It's nothing, really. Just work stuff. You know how it is." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him. I never did. When John didn't want to talk about something, he wouldn't. But then, as we left the restaurant, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. I couldn't help but smile, hoping that maybe he was attempting to rekindle the spark we'd once had. He'd always been good at that, surprising me and keeping the romance alive in his own way. "What's this?" I asked, teasing him as I took the box from his hand. "Just a little something," he said, his voice sounding odd. I opened it, and inside was a ring. But it wasn't a shiny, sparkly diamond ring that you'd expect as a romantic gesture. This ring was old and looked like perhaps it had been passed down through generations. The ring was tarnished, and the stone had a crack in it. "It's beautiful," I said, though I wasn't sure what I meant by that. There was something that didn't sit right in my gut. "Do you like it?" he asked. I nodded, but found it difficult to smile genuinely. I felt chills all over. "Where did you get this?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Something felt wrong. John didn't answer right away. His eyes had shifted, almost like he was hiding something. He looked away before attempting to look at me again. "It's been in the family for years. It's special. I thought you would like it." "Special," I echoed. My fingers traced the ring's surface, and it was cold, even colder than metal typically is. I could feel the tension between us. It wasn't just about the ring. It was deeper than that. Something had been building for a long time. John as acting odd, avoiding my eyes, trembling as he reached for the car keys. But we didn't say anything more on the drive home. It was quiet, other than the rain that had started. Everything was blurred by the water running down the windshield. The wipers were thankfully filling our silence. When we arrived home, we went through our routine of getting ready for bed. John took a long shower while I tried to relax in the living room. But my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept thinking about the ring, about the way it felt in my hands, and John's strange behavior. When John finally came out of the shower, he walked past me without saying a word, heading toward the bedroom. "John, wait," I said, my voice shaking. "Is something going on? Something you're not telling me?" He stood at the bedroom door and turned to me. He stared for a moment, with just a blank expression. Then he sighed and walked toward me. He sat down on the couch next to me. "I've been thinking a lot," he began with a low voice. "About us. About everything." My heart thudded loudly as I waited for him to continue. "I think we're drifting, Sarah," he said, his words immediately taking my breath away. "I just don't know if we can fix this anymore. We've been drifting for months. It felt like the world was tilting." I couldn't breathe. "Drifting?" I whispered. "What do you mean? We're fine. We're busy. We're just busy, that's all. We can fix this and make it work." John shook his head. "I'm not sure anymore. We've both been pretending. We're just not the same people we were when we got married, Sarah. I'm tired. Really tired. I don't think I can keep pretending." I wanted to cry, to scream, but I couldn't. All I could to do was sit there, trying to figure out what he meant. None of it made sense. I'd been trying so hard to hold everything together, and now it felt like it was slipping through my grasp. Before I could say anything, he stood up and went to the bedroom. I heard the rustle of sheets and the soft thud of him getting into bed. I didn't know what to do or say. I sat there for a long time, what felt like hours. The silence was killing me. Finally, I was unable to stand the distance between us any longer, so I went to the bedroom and stood in the doorway. John was lying on his side, with his back facing me. I couldn't see his face, but I felt the coldness coming from him. "John," I whispered. He didn't respond. "I can't lose you," I said, my voice cracking. "Please don't give up. We can work through this. I'll do anything." Still, there was no answer. Something inside me snapped. I was frustrated and scared of losing him. I didn't know what came over me, but I crossed the bedroom, grabbed the ring from the nightstand, and chucked it across the room. The silence was broken by the ring hitting the wall. "Do you really think this is going to fix everything?" I shouted. "This stupid ring? A symbol of what? The lies we've been telling each other?" Finally, John turned to face me, his eyes wide. Was he angry? Scared? But before he could say anything, I saw it, something sharp and dangerous glinting in his hand. He had a knife I didn't see the motion coming. 1 minute, I was standing there, shouting at him. And the next, I felt the cold metal press into my side. It wasn't deep, but it stopped me in my tracks, clutching my wound. "John," I whispered, my voice trembling with disbelief. "What are you?" But he didn't answer. He didn't move. I was frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. My breath came in shallow gasps. In a panic, I grabbed at the knife, trying to push it away. I stumbled back, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what happened. Then, in a blur of motion, I grabbed the nearest thing I could get, a heavy glass vase, and swung it at him. It hit him in the face, and he staggered backward, the knife slipping from his hand. But it wasn't enough to stop him. He lunged toward me, and I fought back with everything I had. My mind was full of fear, confusion, and anger. I didn't know what I was doing anymore, or how it happened. All I knew was I needed to protect myself. The next thing I knew, John was on the floor. His body was crumpled, his unblinking wide eyes staring up at me. His chest no longer rose and fell. "I didn't mean to do it. See you soon, Claire. You didn't think you could just leave, did you? I've always known where you were. That little bus station in the city, that motel with the flickering sign on the side of the motorway. I was watching you, even then. How you clutch your bag when you sleep. How you leave the TV on static to drown out the sound of your thoughts. You're clever, slippery, but not clever enough. I have to admit, you know how to cover your tracks. But you should know that you can't shake off your own tail. You're not running away from me. You're running toward me. You'll see soon. Sweet dreams. Wow. Creepy. Not sure how you got this address, but congrats, I guess. Nice to know I'm living rent-free in your head. FYI, the bus station smelled like pee, and the motel had roaches. So maybe put your stalking budget toward better accommodations next time. Only, of course, if there is a next time. But I wouldn't get my hopes up if I were you. Also, if you're going to kill me, maybe don't warn me first. That's kind of, I don't know, sloppy. Anyway, I've got to go. I'm going on a hitchhiking date with a guy named Dave. He says he's got a van. Don't worry, I checked, and there's no candy. Best, Claire. Concern. Dave has a record. 2 assaults. 1 missing person case. You're not as sharp as you think. Do you know how easy it would be for me to get to you? To pull you from that van before Dave even knows what's happening? The door's unlocked. Sleep tight. Very funny. Except you can't be outside because I'm writing this from the bathroom at a gas station. And I'm pretty sure the only person outside is the clerk on his smoke break. Unless you've taken up vaping? Mint flavored, I hope. But seriously, do you actually think this whole mysterious stalker act is working? Because from where I'm sitting, On a suspiciously sticky toilet seat, by the way. You owe me for that. You sound kind of desperate, following me across 3 states, tracking my every move, writing me these cryptic little notes like some kind of B-list Bond villain. Feels like a lot of effort for someone who insists they're the one in control. And if you know so much, if you've been watching me this whole time, tell me this. Why am I running? Seriously. Enlighten me. You should know why, unless you don't, which would mean you're not half as smart as you think you are. I need to stop writing now, since someone's knocking on the stall door, and I don't feel like explaining why I've been loitering in the bathroom with a notepad. Best, Claire, you're running because you're scared, but not of me. The thing you're running from is already in the room with you. Turn around. Right there. I think you've got this whole dynamic twisted. You think I'm scared of you? Cute. You've been following me, sure. But have you noticed the trail of bodies in my wake? Dave made it exactly 27 miles before he swerved into a ditch. Poor guy. Guess he shouldn't have tried to pull that knife. The clerk at the gas station. You'll see his face on the news soon. Well, most of it. So yeah, maybe I'm running, but not from you. You're not hunting me. I'm hunting you. See you soon. Interesting. You always were a quick study. I underestimated you. My mistake. But you're wrong about one thing. I'm not hunting you anymore. I'm inviting you. There's a cabin in the woods, just outside the circus. Red door, broken window. I'll leave the door unlocked. If you're as brave as you think you are, come find me. Or maybe I'll find you first. By circa, you mean the festival extravaganza, right? Cute. I'll bring wine, and maybe a shovel. See you soon, Claire. Yeah, I knew you'd come. I saw you the second you stepped into the woods. That red jacket of yours stands out in the dark like a beacon. You really should have chosen something less noticeable, or maybe you wanted me to see you. Either way, you're here now. I left a present for you. I thought I might as well give you a chance. The knife I pinned this letter down with is all yours. I trust you know how to use it. Do you feel it? The cold sinking into your bones? The silence pressing down on you? That sound behind you? The snap of a branch that wasn't an animal. You've been so clever up to this point, so slippery, so sharp. But even the smartest prey makes a mistake eventually, and you've just made yours. Don't bother running. I'm already behind you. You're right. I felt you the moment I crossed the tree line. I knew you were there. I could almost hear your breathing, shallow, controlled, waiting. But you made a mistake, too. You let me get too close. I know it's rude, but I'm going to have to return you kind gift. A girl can't have too many of a good thing, or it gets boring. I felt the heat of your breath on the back of my neck, and I smiled. Because I'm not scared of you anymore. Not that I ever was, and you'll never get the chance to write me again. Clever girl, but not clever enough. See you soon. An incident report. Missing person: Claire Marie Jenkins. Location: isolated cabin, festival extravaganza. Details: the cabin was found empty upon arrival. Blood splatters were present, but no bodies recovered. Signs of struggle: one broken window. Unidentified footprints lead into the woods. No return tracks. A single sheet of paper was discovered, pinned to the cabin wall with a knife. It read, "Not yet. Claire is presently missing at time of report. Background checks show that she must have changed her identity. Or she didn't have any family, immediate or extended. Case remains open." Cotuit Circle. Let's keep pretending. I whispered those 3 words with a slight slur. The buzz of 2 champagne cocktails still churning through my veins. The air was thick with that sleepy summertime vibe. Bugs buzzing and crickets chirping their seasonal symphony. I tucked a copper-colored curl behind my ear and squeezed Nick's hand tighter as we strolled through the canopied streets, the golden sunlight still warm on our shoulders. At dinner, we had joked about being rich retirees, just stopping for a quick bite before returning to our yacht for a summer soiree. "Sweetheart, you can be whoever you want to be," Nick grinned, slowing down his lanky stride to steady my swaying steps. "In fact, I have a surprise for you. Follow me." We interlaced our fingers and ascended the hill towards Cotuit Circle. Backed by a ridge of evergreen, the house stood out amongst the newly renovated mansions, its creamy white woodwork and deep sage trim, a charming reflection of timeless architecture. Despite being worn and weathered, the house seemed to boast of its own importance, like a royal battleship returning from war. The setting sunlight sparkled off the towering, tapered windows that flanked each side of the entryway. Fragrant honeysuckle climbed the porch railings in intricate swirls, weaving in, out, and around each delicately carved post. I ran my fingers along the smooth address welded into the bars of the gate. 3, 5, 4. Cotuit Circle. Ka-tuet. I love saying those words, I murmured to myself. Click. Nick opened the gate with a grand flourish. Today, on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, we are touring Gemma Grant's opulent Cotuit Circle home. Champagne wishes and caviar dreams and all that jazz. Nicholas, whose house is this? I fixed a broken pipe here last week. The old lady is gone for the summer. Stop stressing. It's fine. I hesitated. Nick tilted his head in a knowing glance that wordlessly implied, "Trust me." I exhaled deeply to calm my nerves and stretched my arms overhead. "Shit. Ow!" I moaned as my thumb caught on a thorn from the crimson, rose-lined trellis. A tiny trickle of red snaked down my wrist. I pressed my thumb to my lips and rolled my eyes. I'm fine, I murmured. Nick kissed my hand and guided me through the gate to the front door. He entered the same code into the panel above the door handle, and it creaked open. The essence of the interior washed over me. A stale bouquet of black tea, sugared orange cookies, dried lavender, and my grandmother's mille fleurs perfume. My throat burned. I steadied myself against the velvet damask-covered wall and struggled to appear composed. "Do you smell that?" I whispered. "Old lady perfume and dust?" "Yeah, a little. We can leave if you're nervous, but I swear no one is here." I shook my head and hurriedly wiped my watery eyes. "No, show me around," I managed to utter. The house oozed opulence. Thick ruby-red rugs with dizzying geometric patterns covered the chestnut wood floors. Centered in the middle of the entryway was a grand staircase that spiraled up to the second-story landing. Ornate sconces and buttery yellow candles marked the walls. I ran my hand along the carved banister and watched the closing streaks of golden sunlight glitter down through the narrow windows. The central parlor overflowed with collectibles, built-in bookcases full of gold leaf books, decorative lamps, and miniature figurines. Shadows danced along the walls in a forlorn choreography. But despite the soaring high ceilings, the interior appeared to be suffocating itself. There was no room to breathe. "Jem, look, your favorite." Nick appeared completely unaware of the existential crisis brewing inside me as he placed the needle on a vintage Victrola and sauntered toward me. Billie Holiday's voice filled the room. "I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places." I wrapped my arms around Nick's neck, laid my head on his chest, and tried to ignore my rising apprehension. Tick, tick, tick. The second hand on the grandfather clock marked the rhythm of our movement. "I am so pleased you've arrived," a voice rang out. As the record player screeched to a stop, I froze. The known voice resonated deep within me. A gaunt, withered hand delicately placed the record needle to the side. The woman's frail body was stooped over like a wilting blossom. Spotted skin stretched tightly over her bones like sheer sheets of tissue paper. "Mrs. Danforth, I am so sorry. My wife has always wanted to tour one of the Cotuit Circle homes, and I knew she'd especially love to see yours. We didn't mean to intrude. We're going." Nick spoke hurriedly, with his head bowed down. "Nonsense, Nicholas. What a jest. You certainly know I was expecting you both. I'll make us some tea." Her voice clanged out like crystal, delicate and precise, inconsistent with her shriveled appearance. I watched her curved form stagger toward the kitchen door and felt like I was grasping at the last shreds of a dream that would soon be forgotten. I didn't know her, or did I? I began to mouth, "What? To Nick, as he grabbed my hand and led me toward the door. The hearty voice resonated from deep within the kitchen. "Nicholas, can you see to the water faucet in the powder room again? It's no longer leaking, but I cannot seem to get the water hot." Nick shrugged and dropped my hand. "She's old and confused. Have a cup of tea and we'll go. It'll only take me a few minutes to fix the water. Do not leave me alone with her." I shut my eyes and begged. When I opened them, he was already gone. The tea kettle released a shrill squeal, and seconds later, she shuffled out. A stack of cookies and 2 porcelain cups of tea sloshing over on a delicate tray. "Take a seat, love," she said sweetly, as she set the tray on the table and shakily handed me a cup. I positioned myself on the edge of the velvet amethyst couch and ran my finger along the sage ivy swirls of the teacup. I watched the steam rise, desperate to avoid eye contact. "Oh dear, looks like the roses snagged you too," she observed as she held her hand next to mine. Along her thumb was a shiny white scar, identical to the thin red cut on mine. I winced. "Please have a cookie. They are delightful with this tea." I picked up the iced orange cookie and inhaled deeply. I love orange cookies. "I know, it's your favorite recipe," she replied. A trickle of sweat ran down the back of my neck. This old lady was definitely unhinged. "Thank you for your kindness, but we should be leaving. It's getting late." I glanced at the clock once more. The second hand appeared frozen in time. "Oh, shush. The night is young." I even pulled some books off the shelf this morning to show you. I wondered if she would find it rude if I pulled out my phone and texted Nick to hurry the hell up. She slid a stack of leather-bound books across the table and slinked so close to me that our knees touched. The proximity of her presence made me uneasy. I set the teacup and cookie back on the tray, picked up the top book, and crossed my legs away from her. "So, Mrs. Danforth, what do you read?" "Words, words, words," she smirked. I raised my eyebrows to acknowledge her reference. My mind flooded with long-forgotten quotes. "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." I opened the book. "Oh, this is a photo album. Is this you and your family?" My shoulders relaxed as I slowly turned the pages. The photos all had the same muted rust color that designated the passage of time. The images captured a variety of milestones: lake vacations, ski trips, vintage cars, graduations, and birthday parties. Smiling, happy people. "Yes, dear. Long before I lived here on Cotuit Circle. Ka-tu-et. I love saying those words," she mused. Her unnerving remark made me shiver. I set the album on the table and stood to find Nick, but something caught my eye. The album opened to an entire page of a little girl in lavender-striped pajamas, copper-colored curls. I leaned down and flipped the pages faster and faster. The little girl appeared everywhere. Her first day of school, the day she got her ears pierced, the time she fell out of a tree and fractured her wrist. The little girl was me. The saccharine voice soured into a hoarse whisper. Let's keep pretending. To the person who buys my house. Months ago, I uprooted my entire life and moved across the country with very little plan. My wife left me out of the blue. With no tether, I cashed out my 401k and threw caution to the wind. I drove until I saw snow before deciding to try out the small town life. After nailing down a full-time job and growing tired of life in the town's only hotel, I reached out to a realtor and asked her to show me the house that's been on the market the longest. A fixer-upper was just what I needed. The realtor didn't have much information on the home outside of the basics, but I was sold as soon as I saw it. 3 stories, isolated deep in the woods. What more could a man looking to start over with a project ask for? After closing, I was given a fill folder containing all the important information. With all the standard documents was a handwritten letter from the previous homeowner. The contents of the letter have me questioning if I made the right choice, but I've never been one to turn down a challenge. I have typed the contents of the letter below. To the person who buys my house, congratulations on the purchase of your new home. Or perhaps, should I say, you're welcome for your new home. I can only imagine what type of person you may be. A first-time home buyer? A newlywed couple just starting out? A growing family looking for more space? A retiree longing to be away from the hustle and bustle of the city? Or even just an investor looking for rental properties? The possibilities are endless, but no less exciting. Just as exciting as when my late husband and I first purchased the property so many years ago. The tree covering so far off the main road made such a serene setting. We just couldn't picture ourselves living anywhere else. However, all things must come to an end. Such is life. I'm not as young as I once was. My children worried for me out here all alone. Or so they say. My oldest daughter decided the property was too much for me to care for on my own anymore, and encouraged me to move to the old folks' home in the next town. As loath as I was to leave the home we spent such wonderful years in, I could no longer argue with her. The upkeep was getting to be a little much for these old bones. I agreed on one condition: that the home not be put up for sale until my death. So, if you are receiving this letter, I have shuffled off this mortal coil. That also means that the house has most likely sat vacant for some time. In that case, there are a few matters of housekeeping you should be aware of. As you may have noticed when you viewed the property, the house is quite the old gal. Her 3 stories stand tall and formidable in the dense forest surrounding it. Though the trees tower over her, she will not be cowed. The roof has held up better than we ever expected with so many trees around. It was replaced in 2018, another urging of my oldest daughter, though it had only a few cosmetic issues at the time. The trees closest to the home are sturdy and hardly ever dare to drop their branches directly on the roof. By the time you move in, it may be time for a fresh coat of paint, though I found the house does prefer to be a light blue with white trim. She likes to stand out amongst the darkness of the forest. I'll never forget the way the old gal gleamed at Christmas time, with string lights shining bright enough to light up the snow all around. Oh, I do hope you have the most wondrous Christmases there. Anyway, I've gotten off track. Yes, the house will require a new coat of paint, and I'm sure you will decorate the inside as you see fit. Before you start to move too much around, be aware that some of the items in the house have been strategically placed. For you to fully understand what a treasure you have just purchased, I feel it is pertinent for me to tell you a little story. My Reginald and I purchased the home fully furnished before any of our children were brought into this world. The first year we lived there was pure bliss. Young and in love, we dedicated almost all of our time to each other. My husband fondly referred to this time as our honeymoon phase. One of our favorite activities was exploring the vast property surrounding us. When the weather did not permit roaming, we explored the home itself, though from the outside it appears as any manor in the woods would. Inside is much to be discovered. During that first year, we enjoyed the convenience of it being fully furnished and move-in ready. But over time, I yearned to decorate, to make the space my own. Reginald, ever the obedient husband, humored me. We started by taking down every painting that hung on the walls, deciding which to keep, which to sell away, and which to simply move to a different area. That is when the first odd discovery was made. Behind a great many of the paintings, there were holes, right in the plaster walls. Some appeared to be methodically cut in perfect squares. Others, as though a fist was punched straight through it. We, of course, decided that those would eventually be covered back up. I piled the painting up in the drawing room and set about cleaning the walls. By the end of the day, I had yet to decide on what exactly to do with them. So I let them lie and went to bed. In the morning, however, they were all hung perfectly back in their spots, as if all my work had never happened. For days, I assumed Reginald had done it, and he assumed I had. We ultimately didn't speak of it until it was too late. When my Reginald started back to work as supervisor of the factory in town, I resumed my endeavor to make the home feel like it was mine. I hated the big rugs scattered all around the place. I've always preferred a nice hardwood floor. No need for carpets that hold all the dirt and hair that's dragged in. The furniture was easy enough to move out of my way, and the rugs all rolled up nicely. I was mighty proud of my hard work until I got a good look at the wood. Large, dark, discolored splotches marred what should have been beautiful hardwood hiding under those ghastly rugs, which I'm sure you've seen. Unfortunately, much like the paintings, the rugs remained. I'd go into more detail, but some of the full truths have been lost to time. But I will tell you, be careful what you look behind or under. Though the house allowed me to dust and paint and add decor as my heart desired, it did not allow me to leave any of its secret spots uncovered. Behind dressers, cabinets, doors, paintings, mirrors, and under couches, chairs, and beds, the house hides. After the first year, I gave up trying to rearrange and became content with adding a few of my own touches here and there. I think that once the house realized I'd stopped trying to change it so much, it settled down. For a while at least, we entered a time of peace again. But the monotony of loneliness began to get to me. Thankfully, we soon welcomed our oldest daughter. As soon as she arrived, the house awoke with laughter and joy. All hours of the night, she would giggle, and the house seemed to echo with it, those echoes long lingering even after she fell asleep. As we welcomed more children, it seemed that no matter how much we tied, the house remained scattered with toys. It was as if I'd turn my back and they'd all jump right off the shelf and resume their places on the floor. The never-ending chore of putting away made me weary to my bones. In a stroke of wisdom, my Reginald decided one summer to send the children to my mother's for a week. She lived on the coast, never one for the colder air where we chose to live. We didn't see her often, and the children did love her so. Off they went without a complaint, leaving my love and I alone for the first time in over a decade. We didn't know what to do with ourselves. That first night, it was as if we were newlyweds again. But I won't traumatize you with any of that. We felt so young again, only waking when the sun finally shone through our bedroom window, with no rush to feed the masses. When we finally emerged from our bed a little after noon, we walked into an unexpected scene. Every toy, book, pen, shoe, and piece of sports equipment that belonged to the children had been strewn about the first floor in the most uncivilized manner. There was no question that the house had been perfectly clean the night before. Our first thought was that we'd been burgled, that someone had broken in, thinking we'd all left for the coast. The only problem is, we told no one the children were leaving, and we had no neighbors to have noticed their departure. Regardless, we checked for signs of forced entry on all the doors and windows. Finding nothing, we were forced to believe it was whatever force we had once felt in our home, agitated with us once more. As you've probably ascertained, the house is very particular. We had come to accept not being able to move the furniture or pictures, but were only just realizing that the house did not like many of the new things we'd brought in either. How many times had I picked certain toys up off the floor, only to find them there again in the morning? How many times had I unfairly blamed the children for messes they claimed they knew nothing about? That morning, we saw the truth of the matter, and I knew something had to change. The children didn't deserve my anger or anxiety. They were not to blame. When they returned, I was sure to tell them as much. But before then, we had to find a way to coexist again with the forces in the house. What should have been a week of relaxation and reconnecting became a week of trial and error. On the first day, we tidied the house, putting everything back where we thought everything should go. Each room made perfect. Then we waited for the first item to fall out of place. As if the house was testing us, it took hours for anything to happen that first day. Then it started, slowly at first, giving us time to notice the items that were out of place, time to correct. It seemed to go in order of the things that bothered it the most, or maybe just the longest. The first toy to go was a set of bells we'd gotten when our oldest was small. The set was a popular toy amongst all our babies. With our youngest being nearly 8 at the time, these bells hadn't truly rung joyously through the house in years, yet they always made their way off the shelf onto the rug. Our family's peace was more important than any sentimentality, or at least that's what my husband and I agreed. And into the bin they went. Quickly, we noticed patterns. Toys that made too much noise. Shoes that left scuffs on the floor. Sports equipment that may or may not have been involved in a few broken windows and busted light bulbs. Books that sat too heavy on the overburdened bookshelves. Room by room we went, removing any and all items the house found to be offensive. It was by no means an easy undertaking. So many items had many more years of use left in them. But knowing what I knew, I could no longer sacrifice my sanity for a few boxes full of possessions. When the last box of offending items left the property, it was as if the house itself took a deep, calming breath. I hadn't quite realized just how stressed I'd been feeling until I didn't feel it anymore. Weight I'd grown accustomed to bearing eased off my shoulders. The air was lighter, the lights were brighter, and the house even seemed to smell better. Not that there was a noticeable bad smell before. Everything just felt better. That night, Reginald and I slept deeply for the first time in years, waking refreshed and ready for anything. I was ready for my children to come home. This week had been the longest we'd been apart since the youngest was born. I'd spent 2 weeks in the hospital that time, but that's neither here nor there. We had 2 more days before my mother would return them to us, sun-kissed and spoiled rotten in the best way. In those 2 days, I made time to sit quietly and listen to the house the way I used to when it was just Reginald and myself. Familiar creaks and groans greeted my ears. My senses were filled with the house. The smell of wood, water, earth, detergents, fabric, food, all seemed to swirl around me. For a long while, it was all just the normal feelings of home, of any home. Every house I'd ever lived in had the same smells and sounds. I assume every house in the whole world has the same base set of smells, sounds, and lights. I knew there was something past that, though, here. So I waited. A few months back, I'd read a book on meditation, hoping to help lift some of the stress I'd been buried under. While I waited, I took a few quests from my readings. I methodically relaxed each muscle, starting at my toes and working my way to my head. I felt each breath as it traveled in and out of my lungs. I tried to tune my ears inward to listen to the beating of my heart, attempting to hear the blood rushing through my veins. That's when I finally heard the breathing. It wasn't my own. It was offbeat of mine. Reginald wasn't home. We had no pets, but the slow, deep, steady breaths were just a whisper in my ear. I focused with all my might on the sound, hoping to pinpoint the direction it was coming from. Realization dawned on me. I was all around me, as if I was inside a lung. Then, a heartbeat, slower than my own, reverberated around me. Slowly, I opened my eyes. What I saw changed everything. Ever so lightly, the walls billowed in and out. Ever so slightly, the chandelier above my head rhythmically bobbed, as if contracting, thrumming. Everything in the central family room moved in a steady beat. How many days had we spent in this room? The majority of our lives circulated in this room, where we were most often all together as a family, the way a family room should be used. We often joked that this room was the heart of the house, because there was always so much love here. We were not wrong. This room truly holds the heart of the home. You may think I'm crazy, but I am telling you, here and now, the house is alive. It is not haunted. There are no goblins or ghouls. The house itself is a living, breathing being, a being that I have cared for, just as it has cared for me. For more years than I care to count. You see, my daughter never believed. She did not understand. When I finally agreed that I was too old to care for the house on my own, it was because the house told me so. Not her. I was growing too old to care for it, and in turn, it could no longer care for me. It needs someone younger, someone to breathe new life into it again. And if you care for it, it will care for you. When tended to properly, it will multiply your life and give you more than you can ever imagine. I do hope Carmen found the right person to take on the challenge. I pray the house does not miss us too terribly much. If you follow the rules, then it should grow to love you, too, I'm sure. With love, Cynthia. Rule 1. Don't move the furniture. Rule 2. Don't leave any holes uncovered. Rule 3. Don't make changes. Only fix things that break. Rule 4. Don't put anything on the mantle in the bedroom. Rule 5. Never throw balls inside. Rule 6. Never scream at your partner inside. On the grounds is fine. Rule 7. Always walk gently. Rule 8. Always lock the doors. Rule 9. Always listen to the house. Take care of it, and it will take care of you. I have lived in the house for a week now. What I thought to be the ramblings of a crazy old woman who wanted nothing more than to stay with her home have quickly become undeniable truths. On my second night, the house welcomed me in a way only it could have. I'm not sure if this makes me just as crazy as her, but I vowed to care for this home as long as it cares for me. We're off to a great start. Tennies. Time of contact, 15:05:01. Impact force, 6,000 newtons. Serve speed, 135 petras. Distance traveled, 25.5 meter. Angle, 60 degrees to horizontal. Velocity, 82 s. Required service. Return response, 10 paces. Left moving forward, 30 degrees. Commence swing at 15,503. Apply 5,500 newtons of pressure in a topspin forehand shot with an upward trajectory of 35 degrees to the horizontal. That's what the voice of the AI vocoder instructs inside me head for the umpteenth time this session. And who am I to argue? It's not like I'm important. Not like I was ever a champ, much as I came close. Nah, I'm just a chump, now more than ever, prancing around the ryegrass on me hydraulic legs, returning the volleys of the hottest new prodigy on the block, tailor-made to appeal to Gen Xer. In today's case, in this exhibition matches case, in this latest exercise in humiliation of a former tennis pro, now referred to as a legacy player, but nevertheless expected to lie down and be shamed by an AI-driven, Tekla-encased wunderkind designed for clicks and likes. Me opponent is a silver-plated female with a digital display for a face that portrays fluttering anime eyes and a head of artificial dreadlocks. Silver sequined tennis dress that just about covers a polished butt. Pink Bandita's solar-powered shoes that transfer energy into speed through soul-based combustion. Soul-based. 'Cause that's the only soul that robot has. The only soul this game has anymore. Since AI took over in the 50s, machines became the players du jour, and humans abandoned the game because they couldn't compete. Well, the smart ones did. The ones who didn't sell out. The losers still chasing that win. The stubborn didn't know what else to do with their lives after tennis morons like me. And now I'm here in Wimbledon, facing off against 10NIS Inc.'s latest creation, the embarrassingly named, I don't want to say it, don't even want to think it, but I can't help it, 'cause it's painted in chrome letters on her arm, and she screams it every time I throw a point. Tennis. 10. Ice. Get it? Like Denise, but with cause. Yeah, that's the best one of the biggest promoters in modern-day sport, or neural integrated sport, as they call it, could come up with. Anyway, here I am, fulfilling an obligation of the ill-advised contract I entered into when 10NIS didn't want to sponsor me for tournaments anymore, pretending I'm here for a comeback, the 4th this year if anyone's counting, while in actual fact here to make tennis famous. Jesus. I still can't believe someone thought tennis was a clever idea. And it took them 8 years to come up with it. But if it keeps the fans following the sport, if it keeps the heart of tennis beating long after badminton and golf and frickin' darts have breathed their last, that's the important thing, right? Physical sports for humans have been going the way of the chariot race for decades thanks to VR. And nobody cares, except to those of us who have it in our DNA. And all we had to do to keep playing was mutilate our bodies with mechanical limbs and armor plates. 1010IS controlled neural uplinks, computerized smart eyes, and carbide jaws, fiberglass ribs, atomic-powered hearts, and a willingness to do what we're told. Simple, right? What self-respecting tennis pro wouldn't want to go that extra mile to keep competing? And competing I am, if you can call it that. So as the vocoder says, 10 paces forward at 30 degrees, swing at 1503, 5,500 newtons of pressure in a topspin forehand shot with a trajectory of 35 degrees it is. And there's the contact. And there's the return at a whopping 104. And there's Tenise, moving to intercept in line with guidance from her interface. Dreadlocks whipping, skirt lifting, metal ass glinting in the sun, while her polymer crystal-based titties jut out in front, like guided rockets. Of course, she moves perfectly to return the shot. The inbuilt speaker, where her mouth should be screeching another tirade. Think you're gonna cease Tenise's peace? Try again, stinky. Old has-been McEnrobo. It's McEnroe. Fuck's sake. If that bitch says McEnrobo one more time, I swear to Christ, I'll thwack. Tenise swings and volleys. You'll what, Mike? Pull a stunt like your namesake from last century? I don't think so, says Nora, me manager, the other annoying voice inside me head. Thwack! I follow instructions and lob the ball back. Oh, and did you forget about matching the speed of Tenise's shots? You're 5 in by faster than her. Stick to the playbook. Thwack. Tenise with some digital gruntin'. What's the matter, Nora? Can the new dolly not take the heat? Oh, she can take it. I had her set to slow for you. Thwack. Me, without so much as a pant. But if you want to go faster, pile it on. I spit through diamond implant teeth. You spent all this money powering me up. May as well let me employ it. Thwack. Tenise. Show off, you mean? Like an old boy trying to stay relevant. Tenise. Ball velocity cap disengage. Smarmy bitch. I'm more relevant after 40 years in this game than any o 10 NIS's androids, like Bjorn Bot, or Android Agassi, or Robot Federer. What happened to them when the novelty wore off? And don't get me started on Steffi graphics. Unless she's considered relevant for popping a gasket and decapitating people with her racket. The chip in me brain tells me how to return the ball that's rocketing towards me, and I dutifully oblige, channeling more energy into me piston-powered, omnidirectional shoulder. Thwack! 150, says Nora. Fuck me. You're asking for it. Rebellion is frowned upon. The board won't be happy. Like they weren't happy about Steffi? That happened on your watch, right? Hope I don't get you in trouble. Thwack. Tenise whoopin'. 155 return. Fuck off, Mike. Don't remind me. Steffi wasn't ready. I was forced to play her because Esport were debuting Virus Williams. It was a PR disaster. We barely survived. Thwack! At a speed of 107 verdump. I send back the ball, and fanboys in the audience boo at the stinky old man droid who dared think he could take on their idol. But that's okay. I didn't really think it. I'm not here to win. I'm just here for the paycheck. To do what 10 NIS need. Promote their new star. Increase her follower base. Raise revenue for the future of the sport. But nobody cares about that. Not like I did as an up-and-comin', then a contender, then a pro and almost a champ. Even when I failed in 6 finals, lost me edge, dropped out of the rankings, and was relegated to the local leagues, it didn't matter. I loved tennis. It was all I knew, and I wanted to win. Just once, even when the robots took over. I couldn't let it lie, couldn't do what Megan said, and quit. Fuck that. I said. I'll compete till I win or I die. Even if it means modifying me body so I can enter the robot leagues. 'Cause flesh and blood didn't cut it anymore. Not with the greater stakes. With robots taking each other's arms and legs off, punching holes in each other for the pleasure of fools. Yeah, McEnroe had to stay in the game, even when Megan left, 'cause I became a freak. And now look at me, a meme, a salesman, a phony. Thwack. Denise returns the ball and cavorts, shouting, "Take a piece of Denise and decease." What's with these poems, Nora? They don't make any sense. Not my idea. Heads up, Mike, coming at ya. On autopilot, following instructions. I move, swing, strike with even more power. Denise cranked it up to 160. I hit it back at 165. Ugh, board aren't happy, Mike. Told ya. There's a termination contract for you to sign after you finish this set. Thwack. Duck, McEnroe. Denise strips the fleece from the geese. 170. One more game after this to give Denise a 6-0 finish in her debut appearance. You should slow down. You've got an old Model A heart. They're volatile if they overheat. Thwack. 175. Back at the missile-titted bimbot. Beads of sweat on me forehead. One of the few human parts of me left. Haven't felt that in a while. It's nice. Okay, you're not listening. Time you lose your jaw, Mikey. And maybe break an ankle when you fall. Thwack. Still 40-15 to Denise, but Denise will increase. This is the bit that wrecks me, Noodle. Having to let myself be torn apart. 'Cause that's what the peeps wants to see. Destruction and mayhem. Players busted up. Pieces scattered. It's all right, 'cause it's just robots. Robots and crazy old bastards. Funny. After 2 years of this performatory bullcrap, in this particular match, against this particular droid, I think I've finally awoken. Maybe not, I say, as the ball careens toward me at 180. The vocoder is delivering instructions to ensure I mistime me swing. I've played this out dozens of times. Always in the next to last game. Play well till then. Make it look like I might win. Then fuck up and let the newbie triumph. I'm sick of it, and I don't fancy losing today. Not to a robot named Denise. So I ignore the vocoder and instead of deliberately missing. I try to actually send the ball back. It doesn't work. I'm old. I don't have me own reflexes. Trying to override the instructions downloaded into me brain takes effort I'm not used to. So even though I have a decent stab at it, the ball still hits me in the face. Not quite square like it should, but still with the force of a bullet. Hinges snap, carbide cracks, screws and cogs go flying as the metal jaw tears from me face, ripping muscle and skin from me cheeks as it tries to come free. I don't want to break me ankle, and I consciously try to avoid it. But the way I pirouette to the ground makes it fait accompli. It doesn't hurt. The leg's not mine. It's a carbon-based replacement, filled with cables and pistons, metallic blue, like all me robot limbs. But like a real leg, when the ankle joint snaps, it's no use. Take that Robo 4030. Did you seriously try to ignore a direct instruction from 10NIS after what I just said? Nora, in me ear, well pissed. Denise doin' jumpin' jacks and whistlin', the crowd on their feet, cheerin' and laughin' at the old boy down on the ground. Fuck off, Nora. I've had enough. It's not easy to talk with me jaw hangin' crooked and blood from me cheeks fillin'